the idea was to make sculptures you could put on the body.
So I think the starting point for the workshop was to just see everything the sculptures could do with the performer inside, and also what the sculptures wanted to do the most, or find out what was the quality of each sculpture. And we discovered that when the performers' approach when they put them on had a lot to do with what you perceive as an audience when you experience the sculptures. So whether they treated them like more like a holy sacred thing, or like an equal thing, or whether the performer was in charge or decided, the one in power of the situation deciding what to do, or whether it was the sculpture who decided what was going to happen.
The sculpture itself creates a certain expectation, whether it's nonsense, or that it can do many things, or it can't do many things, and then it did much more or completely different things. So I think there's something there to still explore. What was the most interesting thing you found?
For me, it was this thing with taking the risk in the show. How you created this, how can I call it, like magic moment on stage when the audience entered, and by taking this risk that we didn't know how the show would end up, because you cannot control the audience.
What is the best part? What is the specific thing with this sculpture? Because they have different qualities. Some are more trigger some noise, some of them trigger movements. So they have like different qualities. So to find that specific quality for each sculpture.
And it's also this thing that when we started the first days, when they didn't know them, we started to think about this vulnerability that the meeting with the sculpture, we felt that they were like, when they put on the object, they were like lost in a way. You remember we talked a lot about that, Thale, in the beginning. Yeah. But then
we haven't done it before, so everything is like happening for the first time, and that has another quality that I think we found again in giving the audience the opportunity to try it.
how are the materials actually impacting the body when they are worn? And what is the wearer's experience of costume? And how we can design starting from the sensation of touch first, and then incorporating other sensations, but putting the visual last. So it's not designing from the visual aesthetic. This time, what's happened is that the focus has become even more on the material and sensorial agency and how that creates costume agency. So almost to go further into the relationship between materials and sensation, and to see how form might emerge from that place. Feels like there's more flexibility of the materials even having absence of form. How do I create more of a somatic costumed environment that the audience could journey through? So it wasn't specifically just one costume to wear, but that it could be a collection of different materials, costumes, costume elements that have a specific order to create a specific journey through the environment itself. I was surprised how much we went even further into basic elements. We spent a lot of time with water, just listening to water. We sat by the waterfall just to sense how that impacted, the sound impacted our bodies. And then, of course, playing with how the touch of the water would impact bodies if we placed it contained in a bag on different areas of the body. And also I made that installation of water sound, but again, kind of referring to the somatic costume environment. I realized that if people were taking a journey through, that they needed a way of orientating, because touch, it brings attention often towards body first and then outward into environment or others. And they needed a way to locate or orientate. We did have a lot of questions how we guide, because it was one-to-one guides for each audience person, and they were invited to wear the costumes. How we guide an audience through a costume experience, especially with eyes closed. So this is really the first time I've had such a visual absence as a starting point. How do I design and choreograph in the absence of the visual? How do I guide attention, whether that is placing a specific compression on the finger and putting a feather there to extend the finger in space, or placing the water, just on their head specifically at a time where the body needs to be kind of calmed down or cooled down. Feels like this is a different way than choosing things based on visual forms to be looked at or received that way. How the audience's imagination is activated first through the senses. I find that quite interesting, that the senses themselves can activate the poetic imagination.
So, Linnea and Vidmina, how was the costume the starting point for your exploration?
We worked with sound, so we were starting to listen to the costumes. And we even removed sight to be able to only focus on the sound that was generated.
We used eye masks for dancers and also for ourselves. For us, it was very important, this starting point, to really dive into sonic dimension and shift the focus from visual to audio. When the dancers got used to their costumes, instruments, we were exercising with little tasks. For example, we were focusing on rhythms, how they could express the same garment in different sonic expression. And also we were exploring how the sound intensity, in other words, to put the volume from silent up to the very loud, could change, and how we can compose everything together, having like two costumes that are complex, a complex of several sounds.
For me, this was a new way to approach costume with sound. In my original practice, costumes often make sound, but it's never the focus of the exploration. So it was really interesting to get into this, and I felt like I learned a lot from that process. And one of the things that I thought was most interesting was realizing that we only worked, or like when you work with movement that generates sound, it's very short sounds that you generate. It's like start and stop or swing and stop, and it's a specific type of rhythm. So that was interesting for me to realize that these longer sound that maybe are used in music as a tone, or that a tone that's very constant, or like having a harmony, that was something that we actually could not achieve, or that would take more practice from us to achieve. So that was the most interesting finding that I found.
the costumes were a starting point on 3 levels. I had for a long time been wanting to make a puppet theater performance about 2 lesbian photographers in the 1890s. And somebody discovered a box of glass negatives 40 years ago with 2 women dressing up like men and some male friends dressing up like women. So that kind of cross-gender dressing caught my attention. And I wanted to learn more about it and do a performance playing around with gender dressing. The second thing is that I've been collecting quite a lot of clothes and costumes for my performances the last few years. And I was curious to see how with these clothes, whether we could create characters just having a lot of clothes and costumes. So I put this kind of my collection, clothes collection, and create a performance from them. And the third thing I want to do is that I make a lot of puppets, and I make the puppets of the time from the clothes, from old clothes.
And can you maybe just tell me a little bit about how it is to have both, or actually 3 types of bodies on stage? One is a human performer body, one is a puppet, and one is a doll. So how is it to dress them and to transdress them?
Yeah. There is a difference in a doll, but basically emotional relationship between, because a puppet and a doll are both objects, but we read it differently because a puppet is in a theatrical context and you prepare for that theatrical context, while a doll is an object that is manipulated by the owner, and the child normally has a very strong emotional relationship to that. So the way of to dress up a doll is something very different to dressing up a puppet. Normally, you don't dress up a puppet during a show. That's very rare. And often the clothes that a puppet is wearing has a already interpretation in it, while clothes for dolls are basically normal clothes.